So John, can you talk a little bit about
Teams.
what you look for in building a team? And also, it should be noted that John is a gold medal Olympian himself who was on a team. So he sort of knows a bit about that.
What sport?
That when I talk about the sport, it goes horribly wrong.
Okay.
In the US because I'm English.
It was badminton, of course.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I say I'm a hockey player, and of course Americans look at me and go, "You're not a hockey player. You'll get killed." And then I'm actually a field hockey player, and of course then it's just horrible because then I just get, how many other girls were on the team? Did you wear a skirt? And my wife is a lacrosse player, so she's really cool here. She's like really, and I'm not. It's really bad.
So, by the way, before
Take
you
up flag
answer,
football.
Yeah.
before you answer a question too, please do use the app to ask questions. I'll probably look there first before I throw it to the audience for questions. So you're a better chance of getting your question in early if you do that. But I will go to the audience as well if you want to kind of get up with the microphone. So.
And I'm also actually a shareholder in an NFL team. There you go.
Please share which team
one?
you're at.
Green Bay.
Green Bay Packers fan.
I'm a Packers fan.
Please, we're not going to have
Slack.
partisanship in this.
Anyway, back to the question. Teams. It was interesting. We were talking earlier about when I was preparing for that question about teams, I started to write down all the things you look for in people about capability and attitude, etc. But then I sort of stepped back and said, we don't, as marketeers, I think, spend enough time thinking about teams and how do you create a team. And what you can learn from sport and what you can't learn from sport. So some things I think are really interesting. In fact, I do yoga in the morning. I was talking to my yoga instructor today saying...
As we do.
As you do. And we're talking about rest. And I think one of the great things about sports teams is they have vision. They have a collective culture. And the other thing that's interesting about sports teams is you know the competition, but you don't try to be the competition. But sportsmen and sports teams rest, and they create moments where they can regroup and get away from the task of performing. And I think sometimes when you're trying to create a team, you've got to create those moments where you're driving, you've got clear vision, you've created that culture, you're task, but you've got to pull back, otherwise people get burnt out. And I don't think we do enough of that as marketeers, particularly now in a world that marketing is so fast and so complex. And I think that's why you see a lot of people getting burnt out. So I think great teams have vision, have a collective culture, know the competition, don't try to be the competition, but they find ways that they can actually rest.
And how about at the NFL? You came from, you actually probably in just not a too long a span, seen maybe two different approaches to how teams work at PepsiCo, marketing teams work, and at the NFL. Is it a different culture at the NFL, and is there a bit of this sort of very self-consciously team-oriented, sports sort of metaphor-oriented?
Well, I'll
approach?
talk about the NFL in a minute, because clearly sports has an enormous influence on how we operate. But,
right.
I think when you first think about team, you think about having a group of people for whom they all have different expertise. They come from different places, so that you're not getting sort of the same skill repeated, but in this marketing environment, which is so quick and so diverse, that you're getting people that not only are problem solvers and bring different skills to the table, but know how to interact together quickly, real time, to create decisions and create programs. And I think the difference for me at a PepsiCo, where a marketing organization was large and did discrete functions, putting the calendar together, wasn't in the content business. You now take a marketing organization and you put it into a content business that sports is, and all of a sudden, marketing isn't discrete anymore. It's part of the fabric of the organization, and it can't do anything on its own. It's always working, whether it's with TV or it's with media or if it's with football operations. And so the importance on people that are able to stay connected, not only within the marketing organization, but within the whole organization, that's what I place a much greater premium on, beyond just the skills you want people to have as marketeers.
And how has the way that marketing well, there's a premise to this question, and I'll throw this to you, John. A, how has marketing changed or not? And B, how does that affect who you actually want to recruit to your team?
And I think it depends on the organization you work in. I'm a firm believer that the principles of marketing haven't changed. That there are some myths that I was taught when I was coming to marketing that are wrong, but basically the principles are the same, which is loyalty isn't going to be your major growth driver. You need to get, certainly in our category, you need to get more people in. So I need to get more infrequent consumers in. That's the difference between small and big brands, is that they have more infrequent consumers. So I need to reach more consumers. I need to be thought of before they're even thinking about buying. So I need to create memory structure. I need to be disruptive at the point of purchase, and I need to delight consumers with the experience, so that then people will talk about it and want to come back. So I think those principles are the same, and sometimes I get worried when you hear people talking just about a particular function within marketing, as though it's the be-all and end-all. And I think you need a holistic view about marketing. We have a view that we don't have a digital strategy at Moet Hennessey. And we've been on a digital journey. 3 years ago, we were spending 2% of our marketing spend on digital. We're now up to 21%. So we've sort of transformed the capability. But we're very clear that digital sits within a marketing plan. It isn't a separate plan.
Right.
So I think those principles haven't changed. What has changed is the context.
Right.
Technology's changed, how people talk about brands, where people get references. I think there was a conversation earlier today about when I go to a car dealership, I've already decided in many respects. I've read the reviews. I've seen what other people think of the brand. The way talent a young talent is thinking about building their careers is different. Mm-hmm. It might not be so, sort of long-term within an organization. And that adds complexity to a young marketeer's life. I'm really looking forward to retiring.
Right.
It's a much more complex world now.
Right. Interesting.
I very much agree that as much as the vehicles and how you market and the time frame in which you do it have changed, and that social and digital have allowed sort of everyone to share and know things real time, fundamentally, you're still about a brand and what the brand stands for and what its relationship is to the consumer, analyzing who are your current consumers, who are your infrequent consumers, who are your non-consumers, who do you want to get, and how are you going to build a robust marketing plan that includes innovation, communication, everything a marketer uses. And that's one of the tools, is that you're going to create content, you're going to put it out socially. But when I'm advising people wanting to be marketers, I just said, just get the basics right. Just get in there and learn what you're trying to do. What is the competitive landscape? What is the segmentation of the consumers? What does success look like for my brand? What are my goals? And then you can work on how, but don't build your career by figuring out one little silo and how to create content and throw it on a variety of social platforms without first understanding, what am I trying to achieve? And what is the brand about, and where do I need to strengthen it?
Well, that's interesting, and I think especially interesting in the case of the NFL, because I think it's no question that you guys are the strongest sports brand in the U.S. in North America, predominant, very strong globally too, or becoming much stronger globally. In recent years, of course, there have been these drips of various things, whether it's concussion or whatever, Deflategate or whatever it is.
Ray Rice.
And Ray Rice. These all kind of affect the brand and how people look at you. It hasn't really dented the popularity of the brand, but it might change your strategy, right? I mean, how to market. I mean, and also maybe even change whose skills you need the most.
Right.
Is that the case? Have you found that?
Well, I think what in this complex world we live in, it puts a premium on someone who's able to focus everyone on, let's not try to do everything, let's try to do one thing.
Right.
So I agreed to join the NFL actually before the video went viral.
Right.
And then I took my mother to Africa to celebrate her 80th birthday and had zero internet.
That's a very good approach.
Yeah. And I came back and oh, wow, and a fair amount of dialogue about the brand I'm about to take over. And I viewed it as an opportunity.
Right.
When there's turmoil and there's change, people are more receptive to doing things differently. And one of the things that I knew coming into it, why I wanted to join the NFL to begin with, isn't what I love about it now, but I wanted to because of the challenge. You have a very big brand that is very well known in a culture that values being different and discovering things and new things and tends to reject those things which are large and seemingly very successful. So how do you take, on one hand, a sport that people love and a business they want to tear down? And that was honestly our very simple strategy of let's try to get the focus away from the business and all the things going on in the sport and get it back to the game. And let's humanize the brand and show the people that play the game, the fans that root for the game, and what everybody loves about it. Just, your basics. Let's reinforce what they love, and let's not talk about what they don't. So that's the marketing organization.
Right.
But I think the difference between a brand and a game and reputation, marketing can't own reputation. Reputation is a sum total of many, many things. And I think that the NFL lives that every day. So I'm actually part of a group between the PR communications in Washington and the conduct committee that together figure out and are trying to get, again, more connected to figuring out real time what do we do so that we make decisions that not only are the right integrity thing to do, but then we communicate them quickly to the right constituencies in a way that is protecting the brand.
Well, and I want to get on PR because I know it's not your silo, as it were, but I wonder whether they come to you and in what ways they might come to you when they have issues like a guy who's followed by millions of people on Twitter who keeps hammering away at the NFL, who I happen to follow as well, Bill Simmons, on Deflategate, on concussions or whatever. Millions of followers, essentially a marketer's dream to have millions of followers and have influence like he does. How do they come to you and it's like strategies for how to counteract that, or just, how does that discussion go?
I think that the NFL and the sports world in general is not where you would say is the most innovative forefront of marketing. So, not good or bad, it's just a fact.
Right.
So I think we're in a journey to do things differently, and we have to do things differently. So what I think what's happening now is you can't, when you're building a brand, you can't react. What you need to have is a point of view on things. And you need to get that point of view out to people before, ideally, there's an issue.
Right.
And that when there is an issue, I do believe the organization, and I don't take credit for this, it was a broad organization, did the right thing when the video went viral, which is to say, domestic violence is a real issue in the United States.
Right.
We could fight this. We could tell people that the incidence of domestic violence is a quarter of what it is in the general population. That's just going to be defensive, and frankly, people hold us to a higher standard than that. We have this big platform. We are very successful. It is our job to try to, therefore, use that to try to make a difference. So we said, let's embrace it. Let's talk about it. Let's get people help. And we actually went down a journey with a few of the domestic violence, sexual assault organizations that said, let's get awareness of the issue. And then awareness isn't enough because it takes people about 8 times to get out of a violent situation. So let's try to get people to get involved, because that's really, it takes a neighborhood to get someone out of a domestic violence situation. So you get back to it is you just have to, when you have that big a platform and stage, you have to embrace it.
And John, do you get involved in kind of cross PR marketing?
Yep.
And can you
you have your share of issues in the alcohol business.
We do.
excuse me.
Yep.
Get to talk about his alcohol issues. Mine.
I personally don't have alcohol.
Your personal alcohol issues?
I enjoy drinking
By the
in
way, I
moderation.
love Marie Chandon.
Actually, if you do have if you do have kind of an example you wanted to bring up about how that works,
Well, I think the point Dawn makes is right, which is I think when you hit with an issue, then you have 2 choices. One is you have to work quite quickly on this. One is, are you going to engage in the conversation? So how big is the issue? And quite often we will have a lot of little issues that we say we're not even going to engage because we'll just fuel a conversation that is minuscule. But when there are big issues, you have to act quickly. And to your point, I think you do a tremendous job about embracing it. and actually showing the organization cares.
Do we have any questions from the audience here? We're running down on time, and I'm coughing. So if someone else wants to take the mic,
Here's some water.
is there someone? So yes, I'm going to drink some water. That's a good idea. Right here. Thanks.
My name is Sam Whitmore. I published a survey. I read a couple of years ago that the NFL was trying to female fans, builders following female. Was that in your tenure, or is that still a priority for you?
The question is whether the NFL is trying to build more, build a bigger female fan base, in case anybody couldn't hear in the back.
Well, I've only been at the NFL for a year and a half, and it was an opportunity that the league was working on well before I joined, but continues to be. It's just sheer based on the numbers. The NFL fan base today is 46% female, and it has grown 7% in the last 5 years. So it's clearly a big part of the fan base. I think it's 37% of the avid fan base, and do not make a mistake and think that a female avid fan knows any less about the sport than the avid male fan. Whoa, you get blown over. So it's a growth area, but what's interesting to me is in this frenetic world that we live in, and in a world where actually, for example, women are leaving live television at faster rates than men, don't have time. They're 60% of the social platform users, so they're using social. Our ratings are increasing, and the reason they're increasing is that for women, and no sexist comment, they place even more value than men. Men place a lot of value on time out, getting together, enjoying something, escapism, and enjoying something with your friends. Even if they're not physically in the room, you can be talking to them on your fantasy team. Women place even more value on that, and so they're viewing the sport of football and the game of football, whether you're viewing it, live, which is great, or you're viewing it in your living room or on your tablet, as a campfire, as a bringing people together and pausing and taking time out. So I think it's much, they love the action-packed nature of the sport as they do what it creates environmentally.
If I can build on that, one of the things I think marketers do wrong at times is we sub-segment consumer groups too tightly. And therefore, we say we're very targeted, we're very focused on this consumer group, and yet the category is this big. And to grow, you need to actually reach more of your category users or fans. And so for us in our industry, we'd say, we're targeting a millennial female, and she's like this, and her name is X. As soon as you start going down that route, you are cutting off growth. So I think having a strategy that says I need to get to more of the category users or more of the category fans, females, etc., is the right way to grow a brand.
And I think, again, that's where you get into the foundation of marketing is to do big things to big things and move businesses. And understanding the core DNA of the brand, that it is about a bonding experience, and it's about an action-paced sport, that needs to be at the heart of everything you think about. So you might target a millennial female. And by the way, there's 20 different versions of millennial females. So you might take a piece of information or content you have, and you actually adapt the headline or the thought into it 20 different ways. And you need to do that flexible, customized communication. But if it's not serving a bigger platform, and so many of the platforms we have at the NFL are really unisex platforms. They're things that everyone relates to. And so you just have to keep that broader picture in mind as you take advantage of the segmenting power of the tools you have today.
It's a very good point about there being 20 different millennial females, because as we discussed this morning on another panel, generations aren't just one monolithic block.
The point about having a unifying platform, I think, is hugely powerful. We on Hennessey, we have, Hennessey is exploding at the moment, and it's breaking out of predominantly an African-American consumer base. And we have a platform called Never Stop, Never Settle, which is based around pushing the limits of your potential. Everybody relates to that. And so we've run actually about 3 ads, and it's really quite interesting. The first one was with Manny Pacquiao. The second one was with the story of an English guy in the 1930s, a guy called Malcolm Campbell, who broke the world speed record nine times. And the third one was Nas and his story from Illmatic through 20 years. Which ad resonated the most with the multicultural consumer?
The 1930s.
The story about the white guy driving a car fast.
They love history, and I've said they want to relive. You can't tell it in a history book way, but they love learning things.
And also, it's a simple story. It's about this guy drove a car quickly.
Right.
Lots of people can relate to that. So I think you have to get these platforms that cut across demographics.
I see another question in the audience.
Just on this point of cutting across demographics and not letting these sort of traditional categories limit where you're looking to understand your consumers, do you find that part of this in terms of in practice is shifting away from the traditional marketing practice of thinking about customers in terms of demographic variables, millennial, age, female, where you live, zip code, versus behavioral data, looking at who's taking this action, who's that avid fan, and you may find out that some of them are 72-year-old women in Idaho or whatever, but looking at behavior rather than sort of demographic markers.
Are you guys both using data like that?
Well, I think today, I'll just speak for mine, I bet you're the same way. You can't segment just on demographic information. You can't segment just on ethnicity. You segment on mindset, behavior, attitude. I would say the attitude part of it is more important because the attitude will draw the 17-year-old boy similarities with the 58-year-old woman because they have a similar way of relating. So, and in the end, to me, brands, the strongest brands make an emotional connection to you, and therefore the emotive parts of your brand and how that informs behavior is the demographics and the age, that just becomes a targeting mechanism.
Yeah. I think it's right. Mindset, I think, is the right way. We'll talk about millennials, but we're really, apart from they're a very, very big and important group, we're really talking about the mindset. And finding connections with culture. I have the privilege to manage brands that are 200, 300 years old. And we're always trying to find ways of connecting these timeless assets to modern day culture. And that's where you start to understand mindset and behavior more than demographics.
Earlier, we only have a minute and a half left. Actually, is there a last question from the audience? Anybody? You mentioned myths, that there were some myths, and loyalty was one of them. You already went over that one. But there was another one, right, that you were thinking about?
I'm a big Byron Sharp fan, so the whole thing about differentiation, marketeers can spend a lot of money trying to differentiate their brands. I think it's pointless. But having distinctive assets. And I'll give you an example from our world. When you look at champagne, most consumers can't tell you the difference between champagnes. It's a confusing category. It's a complex way of making wine. Most of the brand names you can't pronounce. And yet one brand in the US stands out, and it's Cliquot. And it's had a history of innovation, but importantly, it's got a very, very distinctive asset, which is its color.
Label color.
Yeah, which we call yellow label, even though it's more orange, but it's sort of yellow label. And so you can watch consumers shop, and they'll look for things they recognize and know, because they're going back into memory structure. And having distinctive codes, the yellow of Cliquot, the shield of Dom Perignon, with all the activity behind it is really important. So it's a category that lacks differentiation, but has distinctiveness.
Right.
I find myself spending more time with my team thinking about, we often spend a lot of time on the written word, on what we are saying, where people emote visually. And I think not enough time is spent figuring how you're going to visually put forth that feeling or that attitude, because I think in a digital world, people are becoming increasingly visual.
Sure.
Indeed. And, Don Hudson, John Potter, we're already out of time. Thank you so much for coming. I'm staying here.
We're exiting.
You are escorting yourselves off the stage.
I think we can do that.
I'm going to do a couple hours of just one-on audience now. And we're going to have another panel on the same topic. Thank you very much. Very, very good to have you.